questions we're asked at Melanie Massey Physical Therapy in the pediatric department is, what should my baby be doing at each age? What milestone should they be hitting? So whether it be, when should my baby crawl? When should my baby sit? Or my baby 6 months, what should that look like? So the next year, we're gonna make a video series using my new baby boy, Hayes, showing what each month milestone should look like. Hayes is currently 7 weeks, so we'll take a look at 0 to 2 months normal development. The biggest thing at prior to 3 months is babies are somewhat controlled by reflexive movements. So the most prominent being the asymmetrical tonic neck reflex. And what that looks like with his right rotation, the lead arm extends and the rear arm flexes, and vice versa. We were given that reflex to kind of use as a corkscrew movement to get us through the birth canal, but after birth, when it's not integrated, it leads to a lack of midline awareness and unintentional movements. Here you can see Hayes in a left ATNR position. The lead arm is extended, rear arm's flexed, and you can watch as I encourage him to move his head back to midline. The ATNR resolves. And here's the opposite. As I encourage Hayes to go into right rotation, you see the rear arm flex and the lead arm extend. Vision in a 1-month-old is still very underdeveloped. Babies at about 1 month see 20/400. What that means is what they see at 20 feet away looks the same as what something looks like to us 400 feet away. So a baby can see straight ahead 12 to 18 inches. That's just far enough to see mama when the baby's nursing. In peripheral vision, a 1-month-old can see about 8 inches in each direction. A baby should be able to track vertically and horizontally at 1 month. Here is Hayes tracking horizontally. And here he is vertically. Supine, or on their back, is baby's preferred position prior to 2 months. When you get your newborn home, they'll be in what we call physiological flexion, with elbow flexion and hip flexion contractures, because they spent 9 months in that position developing in utero. It's completely normal and will resolve by 2 months with adequate tummy time. Other big things to look for in supine: baby prefers a rotated head position, but should be able to briefly achieve midline. The inability to achieve midline, just briefly, may be an indicator for a motor control issue. Here is Hayes in the fetal position, or what we call physiological flexion. You can see the hip and elbow flexion contractures. The physiological flexion position does not mean that the baby has the ability to actively use their flexors. So you'll see with a pull to sit, that baby has complete head lag. But with a healthy vestibular system, you can see a small contraction in the cervical flexors because the baby's inner ear is telling them, my head's in the wrong position. Although Hayes has complete head lag with a pull to sit, you can see that he's attempting to flex his chin downward, and that's because his vestibular system is telling him that his head's in the wrong position. In a seated position, baby has very little muscle control. If baby's in a lightly supported position, you can see baby collapses at their hips. And when they're in supported sitting, they'll have a rounded back. Most of the time in sitting, baby's head will be here, but baby can briefly bring head up and then it will return to the flex position. You can see here when I support Hayes in a seated position, he's still rounded at his lumbar spine, not a lot of head control. When I let him go, he flexes and falls at his hips. When I bring him back up to a supported position, you can see that rounded back. Not a lot of eccentric control yet. In standing, a newborn will have what is called a stepping reflex, and that looks like when you put their feet in weight bearing, they'll almost take little steps. Then that will progress to a standing reflex, which when their feet hit the ground, they'll support their weight. And that should be gone by 6 or 7 weeks. Hayes is 7 weeks, and you can see his slowly fading. You can see Hayes' stepping reflex is integrated, but he still somewhat has a standing reflex as he can accept weight briefly. Prone, or on their stomach, is a difficult position for babies prior to 2 months. In this position, because of the hip flexion contractures we talked about earlier, the weight's going to be pushed forward onto their face. So they'll usually be in a rotated position either side with most of the weight through their face. When they see something they like, they can briefly lift their head and turn it to each side, shifting the weight onto their shoulders. Because of the difficulty of lifting their head, you'll often see their little feet kick back and forth as they struggle. You can see the hip flexion contractures pushing Hayes forward where his weight's on his face. It's difficult for him, so it takes a lot of encouragement, but you can see Hayes briefly lift his head. There, he gets it to about 45 degrees, which is age appropriate. And drops back down. You can watch his little legs kick as it gets difficult. Other things to look for prior to 2 months is your baby should be able to coordinate sucking, swallowing, and breathing simultaneously. That sounds like an obvious one, but it's important for breastfeeding or bottle feeding, and we see a lot of babies that struggle with that. At this age, your baby should calm to your face or your voice are being picked up. A couple things to help progress your baby along. Shoot for 20 minutes of tummy time a day. That doesn't have to be flat on the floor. At this age, most of your tummy time can come from belly to belly contact. Your baby just laying on your belly, and you can adjust the position, how far you're leaning back in the recliner to make it more difficult for baby as needed. Swaddling is important to help the baby find midline. Get their hands here, and then they can rotate out of that AT&R position we talked about earlier. Next month, we'll go over 3 months development, and a lot more intentional movements happen at that stage.